Hello everyone. Uh, Once again, my name is Matt Tart, and today I'll be discussing AAA implementation. Um, Before we dive in, I wanted to propose a certain scenario. So, say you've just been hired, and you need a new username and password for your device so that you can access these devices. Now, a network administrator would have to go in and manually configure a username and password on all of these devices. Um, Not counting for any privilege modes that you may require in case you need certain privilege levels so that you're allowed or not allowed to do certain things. This would take an enormous amount of time to implement just for one user, and if you have a small team, it's going to take even more time. And that is where AAA comes in. AAA allows you to remotely configure a username and password and any kind of privilege levels you need so that every device in the network can accept that username if need be. And like I said, some benefits of this would be increased flexibility and control of access to configurations. Just like I said, you would be able to basically implement one username and password on a server, and then when you attempt to log into another device, the device goes and requests from the server if you have the credentials. If you do, you'll be able to access the device. AAA has scalability. It can work with the smallest of networks as well as, just as you saw in the topology, very large networks. Uh, It also has standardization authentication methods such as Radius and TACACS Plus servers. Radius would be your open standard for any devices that are non-Cisco. TACACS Plus is a Cisco proprietary server. Uh, Mainly what I'm discussing in this presentation is more on the Cisco lines. And also, AAA has multiple backup systems. Uh, it's good to implement redundancy so that you can have multiple servers in case one goes down, because if one goes down, you basically are locked out of your entire network until that connection is restored. Uh, Now, what does AAA stand for? AAA stands for Authentication, Authorization, and Accounting. Uh, Authentication, first created by defining method, is first created by defining a method list. It's essentially who is accessing the device is the basic definition. The username, password. Um, this can be created through groups on the server. Certain people are allowed and may be allowed, may not be allowed to access certain devices. Excuse me. Uh, multiple methods can be defined, and order of each method is interchangeable. For example, you can choose to allocate have the Radius server be the first attempt if you cannot access the Radius server, or if the device cannot access the Radius server, it can then use a local login if your username and password are on that device. Like I said, with interchangeability, you can also have it where you can have local login first, or have a Radius server then TACACS, or vice versa, and anything in between. Uh, The list is then applied to various interfaces. AAA is not implemented until you specify where you want it. Do you want to set it on the console line? Would you rather have your authentication set up on VTY lines for Telnet and SSH, or do you want it so that any point that you can access needs to be authenticated before accessing the device? Authorization. Authorization is basically saying, once I know who is accessing the device, what can I do on the device? Authorization provides the method for remote access controls. So basically, you can set up privilege levels. Say you're the senior admin, you may have complete access to all devices, where you may only want your technicians below. Those at the very bottom may only have access to show commands so that they can troubleshoot. maybe some senior admins may have access to configurations, and then your account may have access to everything. It just depends on what privilege level you set and where it is. Um, just like authentication, named list also is also needed for authorization. It also needs to be applied to the VTY or console lines so that it can be implemented. And last is accounting. Accounting, it basically logs all information once someone logs in. It says it can log who logs in, what programs or services that person has started or stopped. It also can log what commands have been configured. This is a great service for troubleshooting in case maybe somebody didn't configure something correctly and you come in on Monday morning and you're not quite sure what happened. You can check the logs and see what commands were issued, see where something went wrong, and then correct the problem and be back on track. And now I just would like to show you a brief configuration demonstration on how to implement AAA on just a basic Cisco device. First thing to do always is to set up a username and password. One of the problems they don't normally discuss is if you do not specify a username and password when you are implementing AAA and the device has no access to a local username and password, or excuse me, a server, you can actually lock yourself out, and you will then have to basically password recover the device. If you have encryption, then you pretty much will have to scrub the device and start over from the beginning. So once we've got our username, we create a AAA new model. Oop. There we go. And once that's created, you want to define what type of server you want to use. For this instance, we'll just use Radius. Implement the host, and then type in the IP address. Once that's implemented, you want to create your list. And what I'm doing here is basically saying I want to access the Radius server first. If the Radius server does not respond, and then I want to use my local login. From here, we're going to implement authorization. And what this says is, once I've logged in, I want to check the privilege levels associated with my account on the Radius server. And the last thing to do is just apply it to the line console. And then also the VTY. Oop. And now all usernames are implemented.